Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Open Air presented by the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm your host, Dexter Wimberly, and I'm incredibly delighted to introduce you to today's guest. Born in 1981, Abigail Deville lives and works in New York City. With a long-standing commitment to marginalized people and places, she creates site-specific immersive installations that surface forgotten histories, including a sculpture built on the site of the former African-American burial ground in Harlem. Deville typically sources objects and materials from the area surrounding each exhibition site. Her theatrical aesthetic embodies the idea that one person's trash is another person's treasure, though the objects themselves are always in service of the stories her installations tell. With family roots in New York spanning at least two generations, her engagement with the city is both personal and political. Abigail's work is also included in the exhibition Beyond Boundaries, Black Abstraction in the Elliot and Kimberly Art Collection, currently on view at the Harvey B. Gantt Center through August 30, 2026. Please join me in welcoming Abigail to today's conversation. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. First and foremost, where are you coming in from today? Like, what city are you in? Are you in New York?
I'm New York adjacent.
Okay, okay. New York
Mm.
adjacent. Well, I'm so happy to have you here today. I mean, obviously, I just read a very abbreviated version of your bio. You have a long, rich, journey as an artist of the past, couple of decades. So I wanted to kind of give you a moment to share your own introduction. Like, how do you talk about who you are in your work when someone asks you that typical cocktail party question when you tell them you're an artist? Um, how do you describe the work that you do?
I use general terms a lot. I say, "Oh, I'm a visual artist and I'm known for site-specific sculpture," but I pretty much make a variety of things. I've done set designs and costume design. I've made a short film, and I'm also a painter. And so it is wide encompassing. It ends up being more about what's most meaningful for the methodology, right? What's the most meaningful way to try to transmute these ideas into a physical form. So it really depends, and the there are really no parameters for me, I think.
That's interesting. Because from what I've known of your work over the years, it has always seemed like you've been concerned with this idea of immersion, rather than, an artist that would sort of stand in front of a canvas and make a painting, and then that sort of object circulates around the world. But I think I read somewhere that you used the metaphor of a black hole to describe forgotten histories, and I know that forgotten histories is a big part of your work. Can you talk a little bit about how that framework developed? Like, what do you mean when you use a term like a black hole is sort of like connected to the idea of forgotten histories?
Well, I think originally I started thinking about cosmology as a compositional device around 2009. And I saw a friend's work, and it was a title of one of her works, had something to do with specifically describing something. I don't remember exactly what it was within cosmology. And then I was just like, oh, I had been trying to reconcile this relationship between thinking about like the constrained or compressed space in my grandmother's like project apartment that I was sharing with her versus like the infinite expanse of the universe, like trying to make this connection, this spatial connection. And then I started thinking about black holes, and also it was really funny around, or serendipitous maybe around that time. It's my first semester in grad school. I was in the fall of 2009. I had found through interlibrary loan some books of poetry that my maternal grandfather had written in the 1970s, and he died when I was 2 months old, so I never met him. And he's from the Dominican Republic. The poetry is in Spanish, but he was writing about the cosmos actually. And so I thought it was really funny that in that moment that I was thinking about a way to kind of think about what's the largest kind of abstraction that you can try to compress ideas into, right? Like not having to make a specific image. I feel like the way that history functions for all of us, or the ways that we think about the world existing before us, is a bit of an abstraction, right? We're handed down these stories. We can see maybe materially and structurally the aftermath of some of the things that possibly could have happened, maybe if the details are incorrect or not, right? And then thinking about what is like the largest kind of framework can you use to describe the impossibility of knowing, or and so in that time period around 2010, black holes were still invisible, which they are not currently. Right, so like we've had some advancements in technology since then. So I was thinking about, well, we could use this idea of like this a black hole is what happens when a star kind of implodes in on itself, and but the mass is unchanged, and it has this intense gravitational force that sucks in everything around it, so and eviscerates the matter, but it's still a gigantic it's a gigantic place in space, and it's still it because it's permeated with so much information. It also has the potential to leak things out, which then create new things in the universe. So that was the original thinking. It's like, okay, what's the kind of largest foil can I use for myself to not try to limit myself into a conversation around questions of black and brown history.
That's excellent. I wanted to talk about research because it seems that research is such a critical part of your process. So can you walk me through how you typically conceive of an installation? Like what does your research process look like?
It depends. A lot of times I get mostly I get commissions from the nowadays universities, but different institutions where I'll be invited to come and make something. And generally, I will just start researching the history of, particularly maybe the location of where that institution is, right? And thinking about maybe the direct neighborhood vicinity, right? Who were the original occupants? Who are the people that live there now? And start, maybe I'll go to a local bookstore, or if it is university affiliated, use the university libraries and see what research materials they have there. And kind of like, depending upon how much time I have, dig around until I land on something that I'm interested in talking about, or something that feels real to me, and really everything just gets built from there. So once I find or zone in on the particular history that I'm speaking to, I have like a laundry list of questions that I ask myself. So I really interrogate myself as to why does this need to exist, or why does this form to need to exist in this particular way. And then there's like preliminary drawings maybe of how the space will be shaped. And then the final and kind of like the fun thing is the material collection on for the actual exhibition, or for the installation.
I think I read in an interview, I don't recall where the interview was, but you said that being an artist is never about you. What do you mean by that, and how does that inform the decisions you make in the studio?
No, well, I mean, being an artist is extremely privileged position, right? Because and there's not that many people that get to expound or expand on the time that they're living in while they're in it, right? Like most people have to work, 9 to 5 jobs, raising children, have responsibilities of all sorts, right? And so then when do you get the privileged moment to step back and think about what does your life mean in relationship to the world that you're living in, or what are the things that are profoundly interesting to you that you can't stop thinking about, or that that you could have the time to obsess about particular things and go down rabbit holes of inquiry and then make something in response. So I feel like it's a it's a really roundabout way for me to become a historian, or to engage with history in a very particular way. But I think it also hits all of the other registers that are the intangibles, right? Like, because if you could write an essay about it, then why won't you just do that? Or if you could make a song about it, then you could just do that. You know what I mean? So then what is the point then to have to make a physical object or try to make history real for someone in a particular space? And so that I always felt, I felt this since grade school, and I don't know if that's just like how I am as a person, or if that's like just early feels of learning, right? Like when you read something, I remember in fourth grade specifically reading or learning about maybe the story of Pocahontas or whatever, and then knowing that I know James Baldwin has that quote where he says that he knew that, you know, the Indians were him, right? Like the Cowboys and Indians, and you were always rooting for the Cowboys to win, but the Indians were him, right? So I always knew, I was like, oh, yeah, that's me. Like, you know, when you're trying to locate yourself within a history, right, with the information that's being presented to you, you're trying to find yourself in that, and you're like, oh, you know what? I for some reason I don't know why, but I think that's me. You know, God bless my fourth grade teacher. She really taught us critical thinking because I can't remember ever having it before that or after that. But you know, anyway, she did enough. That she planted enough seeds to make me question everything. But I think, yeah, that I don't know. I got lost there in my talking, but
No, well, I think the idea of questioning everything is also kind of like central to what I, understand a lot of your work is about. It's not like an acceptance of a presented history. It's really a deep dive into, obviously the truth is always, in some ways, some people would say it's subjective, but it's like a deep dive into a different kind of truth rather than what is generally presented. Um, so you've worked in a lot of different cities and countries. I believe you worked in obviously New York, Baltimore, DC. I think you've done projects in Norway, Rome, and some other places. Does the location that you're working in have like a profound impact on the way you're creating your work?
yeah, I think it's different every time, especially because you know, I find it it's a different reception when you do things in Europe, and it's different as an outsider having a conversation about what might be their filth, right? Like you know, that people aren't don't take too kindly with that. I've been blaming it on the fact that I'm a New Yorker because it's pretty obnoxious to like go places and then dig up people's garbage and then tell them about themselves, right? Like, and you know what else about your history, and I'm gonna take the rubbish that you threw out on Tuesday to tell you about it, you know. Yeah, people like when you present or represent the Black American experience and you're dumping on the United States. Europeans are here for that all day. Like they will eat that up. But like once you then, you know, turn the table and or, you know, hold the mirror up and ask them, well, what is this? Right. Then, you know, the reception is, you know, maybe not so great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to take a moment to talk about that a little bit more. It's kind of coincidental that you would even say that because just yesterday I was having a conversation with someone about something similar. So I'm an American, obviously, and I'm a New Yorker. I don't know if you knew that, but I've
Where
been
you
living in
from?
Japan, Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy,
Okay.
born and raised,
I was gonna
born
say
and
what high
raised.
school you went.
Brooklyn Tech, but
Oh,
yeah,
all right.
born and raised.
Official.
Yeah, yeah. I've lived in so many different neighborhoods in New York, but I grew up in Bed-Stuy. Um, and so, but I've been living in Japan for the past 5 years. And
Hmm.
so, yesterday's conversation was with another artist who also is American, and we were talking about how sometimes when people talk about their love of Japan, this is like, and that's it's kind of a bit of a tangent, but it's worth getting into. They're always talking about it through the lens of the things that they like. So it would be the food, or would be the art or the culture, but they don't necessarily talk about the darker side of Japan's history, especially its activities in Asia during and after World War II, for example. Um, but those you know activities, those atrocities that are well documented, are not singular to Japan. If
Hmm.
you go to almost every major economy country around the world, they have a similar laundry list of terrible things that they've done,
Hmm.
right? And so, to some extent, I think our conversation, how it connects to what you were saying, is that this same artist said, when she lived in Belgium, they also never talked about Belgium's activities in the Congo. Like they never talked about it, right?
That's exactly what I'm referencing, actually. I had a
Right,
show in Brussels that like was like inflammatory, and it was like my gallery still they never sold anything from that show. And it was another Belgian artist or Belgian artist that was at the opening that was like starting beef with me because I made the entire show about King Leopold II.
right, right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And if your show had been about George Bush, they'd have been happy with that. Like that's
Yeah,
like
then he would have sold something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. Like when you hold a mirror up to any country's true history, it makes people incredibly uncomfortable. Only a certain kind of person can just accept the reality that has happened and that they have to, talk about it, reconcile. A lot of people just want to pretend like some country has a monopoly on that kind of activity, which is just completely part of the propaganda around capitalism and governments. But I digress, as they say.
This
So
artist actually that wanted to be for me at the opening wanted to talk about all the good things King Leopold did.
really, really.
Yeah. Yeah, this is 2017. It's not that long ago.
Really? So one of the other things I wanted to ask you, you deal with a lot of heavy subject matter in your work, right? How do you how do you protect is probably not the right word, but how do you I'll use that word anyway. How do you protect yourself emotionally? Like how, because you're looking at all of this material, you're mining all of this data, that sort of things that people don't normally talk about on a regular basis, but you're exploring this and you're exposing yourself to this heavy material on a pretty regular basis. How do you protect yourself emotionally?
I think I'm much better at it now than I was 10 years ago. I think it was that year that 2017. In 2017 I did 14 consecutive projects. I was pretty much on the road the whole year, and I would go from place to place doing preliminary research. And once you spend any time in any city, the players were different, the names were different, but the foundational elements were the same. And there was moments where I felt like I was having a breaking point, and thinking about, because I did a project in 2017 in St. Louis, Missouri, but then also um, preparing for a project that opened in 2018 in Portland, Oregon. And so I was at the gateway of the West, and then also where the Lewis and Clark's expedition ended up in 1804, right? Like they ended in the Columbia River Gorge, which is right by Portland, Oregon. So it was the thing. It was simultaneously like being at the beginning and at the end of this trip, or this, like, that century that made America, right? Like the all the myth making, all of the manifest destiny, this stuff that's been divinely written or ordained to conquer all of these peoples and these lands and have this one gigantic nation, right? Um, I was kind of losing it, like I was unraveling a little bit, but I think I just have a much better grip on things now. I think the only way to do it is to find, it's the dirty word, the D word is discipline, right? Is to figuring out how not to let like the kinds of I don't want to say demons of history because they're still present. Not to let that kind of stuff get in you. It's raw material, it's information, it's how you can access like greater understanding into our specific cultural moment, but it doesn't mean that it has to like live on the inside of you. So then how can you read something but then keep it at a distance also, right? So where you're not internalizing it. And I think that just takes time. It takes like maybe long breaks, it takes maybe runs, lots of trips to the gym, I don't know, whatever you need to do to get the stress out of your body so it doesn't try to take residence up in you. I think there's lots of ways to try to trick yourself from the emotional weight from it. But I still feel like it's an absolute privilege to be able to do it at all. You know what I mean? To be able to mine any of these histories that have fallen out of favor that nobody wants to talk about currently, right? Because for some reason, I don't know when slavery became taboo. You know, it's a fact. Okay, give me a break. But anyway, moving on. I think, yeah, I just, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know what else to say other than it's like a like, oh my God, no. I just thought of something terrible. You know, almost like the divine right of kings, right? Like, okay, it is my divine right to be able to be here as a representative of my ancestors in the 21st century telling the truth. I'm never not going to stop telling the truth. I don't care how unfashionable it is, how nobody wants to hear it in this particular moment, how we, you know, collectively we might have amnesia as to how did we get here. We know how we got here. It has been a consistent through line for the last 250 years and beyond that. So, you know, happy to dig up dirt whenever I can.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think those in power are, they're running a good game on people by convincing them that either those things didn't happen or that they're not important. And it's really just, in my opinion, just kind of like a setup to be able to do those things again. Simply when people are unaware or unwilling to accept the realities of their past, they're
Mm-hmm.
basically setting themselves up to relive the past. And that's
Yeah,
it's a
you're
yeah. And I remember some of my first introductions as a 11, 12-year old to some aspects of American history that were never taught to me within the classroom. I got exposed to that information when I was a member of certain like after school clubs and groups, like Black History Club and things like that. And then, our teachers who were, African American teachers in a generally white school system would show us documentaries and things. And some of those documentaries, and I think back on it, if he showed those today, he lose his job. Like there's like no way, there's no way. Because I saw a documentary about Emmett Till, for example, when I was
mm-hmm.
around Emmett Till's age. So it really impacted
Mm-hmm.
me in a
Mm-hmm.
crazy, crazy way. The anger that I felt because of what had happened to that young boy and
Mm-hmm.
the lack of justice that followed it like completely reshaped my brain. And I think that not being exposed to the truth also shapes your brain, right? So there's like because I would be a different person if I didn't know those things. Like I'll put it simply like that. If I didn't know the things that I knew, or rather, if I didn't know the things that I know about American history, I would not be the same person that I am today. Like so I believe that fully.
If,
And I think
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so in a way, not being exposed to those realities also shapes you into a different kind of person. I think that's fascinating. I mean, um, they do those experiments with twins who are separated at birth, and one lives one life and one lives another life. And I imagine that two genetically, relatively identical people, if one is taught a certain amount of history and the one isn't taught that, and they meet again when they're 21 years old, they're going to be entirely different people.
Mm-hmm. I don't
Absolutely.
think they can do those experiments anymore.
No, 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 no. I don't think so. I don't think so either.
That was
Uh,
some shady stuff that was going on there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I know we have some images of your work that I'm excited to take a look at and have a little bit of conversation about. Maybe we'll get the first image up. And I'd love for you to just take a moment, share what you can about this installation, this work, and then I'll have a couple of follow-up questions for each image.
Okay, so this work was up at the University of Richmond earlier this year. It was up from about February to May. And they have something circulating at the university called the Tucker Boatwright Prize. So they invited two visual artists to come and make something in response to the thematic for the year, which was Reconstruction. So Originally, my dad's family is from Richmond, Virginia. They left, I think, around 1942, and it was a great mystery to me. I didn't really know they, for whatever reason, they cut ties, and they maybe went back for a while to visit people. But by the time I came around, there were no more trips to Richmond. And once my great grandmother passed away, that really like severed the ties there. So I know I have cousins there, but I've actually never met them or know what their names are. But anyway, so I found my great grandfather's death certificate in 2015, and I was a visiting artist at VCU just for like a week. And I was finding all this information that I had never uncovered before just while I was there, like in my hotel room on Ancestry, and that was like really blowing my mind. So my family lived in Jackson Ward. I was like, VCU is basically occupying Jackson Ward. And I was just like, oh, wow. And I found this man's death certificate, and I just saw that it said that his skull was fractured. And I couldn't think of anything else because, he was 28 years old. And my grandmother was his only child. She was about to be 4 years old when he passed away. And she knew nothing, literally nothing about him. They called him the silent generation. She always say, you were supposed to, you were just supposed to be seen and not be asking no questions. Nobody was going to answer you, seen and not heard. So she never pried. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to pry. And I presented the death certificate to some researchers that I was working with at the University of Richmond, and immediately they identified, how sometimes you're too emotional to read a document, you can't actually assess the information that's before you because it's too much. So they said, oh, well, it says Central State. He died at Central State. And I said, well, what is that? Right? Like, I don't know what that is. So it turns out that it is, I will give you the old school official name for it. Um, Excuse me one sec. It was called the Central State Lunatic Asylum for the Colored Insane. And
Wow.
so that ends up being the first Black insane asylum in the United States of America post Reconstruction. So it was
Wow.
formulated in about 1868, and it was segregated until 1963. And my great grandfather died there in 1938. And so there's something that happened in the 30s and 40s where they ramped up the admissions of particularly Black men, Black young men, into the asylum. And so it's also like a pre mass incarceration situation. But since it was the only Black mental health facility in the state of Virginia, there I was talking to, there's a board of people called the Friends of Central State, and someone called Dr. King Davis, who is like kind of spearheaded all of this saving of the archive of this mental hospital because the Library of Virginia rejected taking the files. They didn't want them. And so they've kind of been tasked with saving all of these documents as a historical record. But so anyway, through this, I met all of these incredible people. I was able to access my great grandfather's medical records. And so I do now know the full story. But so in particular to this image, I was thinking about the kind of impossibility to know what actually went on there. There's a burial ground there actually that they did a geological scan, I think around 2020, and there's 4,200 interned bodies in this one spot. And on average, I think there was maybe I think it was around 5% of the population was dying annually, but there was also a TB ward. But the conditions were, really barbaric. And it was really initially, they talk about, this idea of drapomania, which in the 19th century, this quack, Samuel, I'm dropping his last name right now, came up with this idea that it was an impossibility that African Americans could be mentally insane or disabled because, that slavery was what was keeping them sane, basically, that it was humanly impossible for them to be insane. Um, but then right after emancipation, of course, then, freedom quickly made them insane, right? So this place was also a working plantation. And so people were like kind of sentenced there for the rest of their lives. And so that's also why a lot of people ended up dying there. But so when my great grandfather was there in the 30s, there was so much overcrowding in the men's ward that the beds were 18 inches apart. So I was able to source a bunch of beds, like former military barracks, and also beds in the Richmond area, antique beds from the 1930s, to think about the kind of procession of, the cradle to the grave, in the terms of the way in which these bodies and these humans were like stigmatized and thrown away by this particular system. The casket that's in the center of the gallery actually was from a historic black owned funeral home in Jackson Ward. This antique place that partnered with us for materials for this exhibition, loaned it to me for the exhibition. And so then I was thinking also about, and you can move on to the next image, I guess.
Yeah, let's go to the next image. Yes, that's good.
So these are the beds. These are the military barracks. I painted everything blue because there's like a simultaneous this relationship with, I know with I know with West African culture, but I think I also am like inserting blue all of the time, kind of like on the fringes of everything, or even making it the centerpiece of a conversation because of the kind of multitude layered meaning that exists within a color. And I'm always nodding to the middle passage in most things that I'm making. But also there's this documentary that I constantly cite. I can't remember the historian's name right now, but it's from the BBC. It's called the history of art in color in threes or something. It's like three colors. It's from around 2010. There's one
Okay.
on white, one on gold, and one on blue. And so the blue one, he really opens up where he's talking about that, there's very few materials in the earth that actually are naturally blue, right? But that we live on this blue planet that actually isn't a blue planet, right? It's an optical illusion, right? Because of
Right.
infrared and is it infrared and also is it purple? I'm dropping it right
Ultraviolet.
now. Yeah, it's ultraviolet and yeah, and red, and then our eyes mixes together and we think that it's blue. But once like he talks about like, when you're looking out into the sea and like the sky and the horizon line, that's one of my favorite things actually about being alive on Earth, right? It's like you're at a beach at 3 a.m. and you're looking out into the horizon and you don't know where the sea starts and the sky ends, kind of thing. That meeting right there. Um, Thinking about the intangibles, right? That there's very few blue things that are actually blue in nature, but blue ends up being like kind of one of the most popular colors within humanity, right? That in the formation of ancient languages, right? Like I think there's only like maybe a handful, like the Egyptians and the Greeks both had words for the color blue, but everybody
Right.
else they didn't. Like blue was a
Right.
variant of black. So blue and
Right.
black being absolutely the same.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah.
And then you think about, okay, well, can I grab the sky? Can I hold the sky in my hand when I'm looking at this water and the water looks blue, and then when I put my hand in it, it isn't, right? So it's like it's all of these things, right? It's like this condition of longing, right? Like this intense yearning to understand something that is beyond yourself, that is omnipresent. It's everywhere. It's all the time, and but you can't actually grasp it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've read about this idea, this idea that blue didn't exist until a certain point in time because there was no
Mm-hmm.
language around it, and that's absolutely fascinating to me. I don't think a lot of people actually realize that because of the ubiquity of the color. It's like it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
imagine that there was ever a time where human beings didn't have a vocabulary for the color that we see what we see everywhere, right? That it was
Mm-hmm.
uh, a variant of black, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another view of the same installation, of course.
Mm-hmm. So there were some, you can't see it because the image is too small, but there were some historical images of the hospital that were pinned to that blackboard. And then it's not in this image, but there was a human brain that was also seated onto the desk that I think that I borrowed from someone's personal collection at the University of Richmond. But
Hold
I
on a
think the,
second. Someone's personal,
yeah, I,
a real human
I,
brain?
a real human brain that was gifted to her from her brother that she's had since the 1980s. And so I think the person whose brain it is was the same generation of as my great grandfather, who was born in 1910. So I thought that was really cool. I was really into that. But there's also a sound piece that you can't see from these still images, but the in the Perseus galaxy, there's a black hole that NASA had recorded vibrations from, maybe like almost 20 years ago, and then maybe about 3 or 4 years ago they made it audible for human frequencies. And so you can look this up. It's just this kind of roaring, this like intense roar, so that there is
I've heard
sound
it.
in space. Yeah, we just can't hear it, but you can find this easily on YouTube. It's in the Perseus galaxy black hole. So that's what the sound was in the installation. So then thinking about the sound of the black hole, the silence of all of these men and women that were kind of trapped here on this plantation insane asylum, um, up until, I don't know, very recently, or maybe 50 years ago or so. Um,
Yeah, it's always striking to me when these kinds of histories are discussed, and then you overlay a timeline, and you realize, at least for myself, you realize that you were actually alive when these things were
hmm
happening. So it's
hmm
like it's really it hits you in a very, very different way.
The thing that floored me about this is that it's the birthplace or cornerstone of Black mental health in the United States.
Mm,
And I don't know how many people know about it outside of the state of Virginia. And it's
right.
still a functioning place. And it is
It
still the
is.
only, yes, it's still open. They have been fighting with the state for years to upgrade the buildings. They're finally getting a new building. It's a sprawling campus. And most of the buildings on it are not usable because they were built like in the early part of the 20th century. They're falling apart. They're filled with like, asbestos and all these other things. But um, they're too crazy actually to knock down too. But so yeah, and it's the only asylum, or I shouldn't say asylum, but it's the only mental hospital in the state that has like a high security wing to it currently still.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't want. I, don't, I was gonna ask some more questions about the facility, but I think in the interest of time, we'll talk about this particular installation outro. Maybe I'll circle back to my questions later.
Okay. So this is called Leo Vendi's Orion's Cabinet, and it's 2025. I made it for the Monuments exhibition that was at the Mocha Geffen, or Geffen Mocha at Mocha.
Mhm.
Which was a gigantic show. I think that particular building is like 60,000 square feet, but it was almost 10 years in the making, curated by Hamza Walker and Bennett Simpson and Carol Walker. But they commissioned, I don't know how many people, maybe I'm going to say 15 people. They commissioned 15 artists to make works in response to decommissioned Confederate monuments, and some specifically that were from Richmond, from Baltimore, from all over the United States, in which Hamza was able to get access from different bureaucracies that were kind of trying to, one, unload them, and two, anyway, it was an intense undertaking. And so they invited me to make something in response to one of the decommissioned monuments, and I chose the Vindicatrix, which was at the top of the Jefferson Davis Memorial that was installed in Richmond, Virginia in 1907. And she was modeled after a local woman, but is an allegorical figure who has her finger pointed up to the sky. And Dio Vendis is the Confederate motto, which is, loosely translated, that God will vindicate us, or God is our vindicator. And um, I think I have been trying, which, somehow this year I've had two back-to-back shows at Richmond, which in Richmond I can't believe because I've never even really spent that much time there, but I've always wanted to take some shots at it. But so this piece is now actually just open recently, June 5th at the ICA at VCU. So it's one of the only pieces that traveled from the exhibition. But it's 43 china cabinets that I collected off of Facebook Marketplace for time and budget constraints. And then drove them to Los Angeles and burned them at a studio there, and then installed the piece at the museum. So my original thinking was when I chose the Vintigatress as the model or the impetus or the inspiration for this piece, I was just thinking about inheritance, right? Because people always like to say, I just had a wild conversation with an Uber driver. I won't go into it about reparations, but people try to act like I don't know. Um, well, you know, somebody didn't recently enslave your ancestor, kind of a remark or kind of like a throwaway kind of thing with like actually like cognitively considering what nonsense you're saying. But like if we are still in the throes of white supremacy, and if nobody has been technically and big hard quotations on that, with the exception of incarceration, like enslaved in the last 161 years, then who's perforating these beliefs or these ideals? And so now I wasn't necessarily blaming all white women, but thinking about this idea of like, the the what is it, the Daughters of the Confederacy, and a lot of that group in particular helped ushered in all of these Confederate monuments at the beginning of the 20th century, right? It's like 40, 50, 60 years after the war, and the revision was like full underway. And thinking about maybe the lives that they thought that they were raised to think that they were going to have, right? Like if a whole generation of your brothers and lovers and potential mates or whomever is destroyed or permanently maimed, right? And thinking about you as a faithful Confederate daughter, how is it that you're going to proliferate your ideals into the present, and they are still with us, right? And so thinking about these cabinets as like bastions of tradition, but then also, I mean, they definitely have. Was it? I'm gonna say the wrong name. I want to say William and Mary, but I did some research on like the wood making or carpentry history in Virginia, and then the kind of idea of when china cabinets really hit, and it really does hit in colonial era like America. It's like it's that moment of colonialism in the earth, right, where this cabinet becomes an object of desire, right, or the idea of it, the symbol of it, and the things that it reflects on the family that owns them. And so it was hilarious to be collecting all of these mid 20th century ones that span the gamut in terms of socioeconomics, right? Like in terms of the ways that the old ideas of what wealth and status look like in a domestic space or a domestic home.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by that idea of wealth and status in a domestic space. I grew up with a mother from the South. My mother's from Georgia. And as a result, she's from like rural Georgia, born in 51, like in a town called Camilla, which is closer to Florida than it is to Atlanta. So deep, deep South. And the things that she carried with her as her like the memories that she had from being a young girl, but then like what her aspirations were when she made it to New York, where I was born, and another one of my siblings. This idea of like what does it? How do you signal having in your mind like having made it? And she would buy all of these things that made no sense to me when I was a kid, like the china cabinet with things in it that we never used, a room that was sort of like this like almost like a museum like dining room in the house. Like we had a kitchen that we ate in, but there was this other dining
Mm-hmm.
room that we didn't eat in, but it was
Mm-hmm.
there. Sort of like
Yep.
um, but it was all of that symbolism, that sort of almost Southern symbolism that she was trying to interpret in her own mind, like how she would like kind of deal with it all. So I know that you didn't want to talk about your Uber ride and the conversation around reparations, but I would,
God.
but I'm always up for a brief chat about reparations and like different people's opinions about it. I'm always down for that. So, can you just give me one highlight, like one thing out of that conversation?
It was Juneteenth. It was before 9 a.m. my driver was listening to something, so he wasn't talking to me. And then he said he was listening to, like, I guess like a TikTok like person, like transmission or whatever, somebody going off on TikTok. And I said, and then he was like, "Oh, they must have killed it because of the language." And I was like, okay. I was like, "Well, what was it about?" He was like, "Reparations." And he's like, I don't believe in that." And I said, "Oh God, why? Why? Give me a break." I didn't say that to him, but I said, "No, that's trash. Next." And then what did he say? He said, "It's not white people's fault," or like, I think he meant like contemporary white people's fault. And I said, it's not descendants of formerly enslaved black people's fault either. Like, what are you talking about, bruh? And then he took me to the wrong address, and I was sat there and laid into him for like an extra 5 minutes. Like, I was already at the stop at the wrong address that I told him. We were still arguing about, because he was saying all the things. I think, he was just trying to piss me off, and I didn't realize it till later. He told me, "Why don't we just go back to Africa?"
Really?
I was
Really?
like, "Oh, what? Where are you from? Like, do I need to get the teacup out and the spoon? Cause you in the sunken place, baby. I don't know what is going on right now." Anyway,
Wow.
I was like,
Wow.
if you came here last week from the Ukraine, you still benefit from being in a white supremacist society. No, it's not your fault. I don't care. And he was like, "Well, if we get reparations, then everybody has to get reparations." I said, "Wow, you know what that might be? The start of a democratic society." Give me a break.
Well,
Anyway.
listen, people's opinions are informed by their knowledge or lack thereof, and also people's opinions are informed by their agenda. So that's a whole nother thing as well. I mean, I think it's interesting that the conversation around reparations has been so stonewalled, um, the way that it has, because it's an economic conversation and a cultural one, but it's economic and it's clear as day. The numbers don't lie. You can look at the results of, if even if not the results of slave trade, you can look at the results of Reconstruction and the lack of civil rights and see clearly how it has affected the economic standing of not just black people, but a lot of other people who didn't benefit from you
Mm-hmm.
know what's going on in this country. But I
Mm-hmm.
wish we had more time to talk about reparations. Maybe that's a separate conversation you and I can have. So I think this is another detail of the same work. We have a couple more images. Let's advance to the next image.
Yeah, this is it at currently at ICA. So this image and the one before it. So this installation, I think, is a little bit more intense because the space is more compressed. When it was at the Geffen, the gallery space that it was in was about 5,000 square feet. I think this one is more like 3,000, and the ceilings are much lower. So the intensity, there's nowhere for you to like escape from, and we could control the light in this situation. So originally, my inspiration for the lighting was thinking about the scene when Atlanta's burning and Gone with the Wind.
Yes, yes, I get that. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know if I said that, but anyway, this was based on the destruction of the Confederacy, or when the Confederacy was like abandoning Richmond, April 2nd through the 5th, 1865, 1865, not 1965. Yeah, and it's in the shape of the constellation Orion, so that's where Orion's cabinet comes from. So Orion is Orion, as named by the Greeks. And so thinking about the ways in which, right, like the same way in which the Vindicatrix has her finger pointed up to the sky, saying that God will vindicate us, the ways in which we take things that are predate ourselves and ascribe meaning and mythology to them as like this way of legitimizing power and positions.
I think we're at the final image after this one, which is a another directional shot of that same work. Let's
Mm-hmm.
switch gears little bit. We're down to our final 10 minutes, so I have a few more questions I would love to ask you before we run
Mhm.
out of time here. So we haven't talked about sort of your like career as an artist who's making this kind of work. So I'm curious to know, because you're not an artist that is making, small objects that are easy to transport and sell to collectors. How have you navigated that aspect of your career? Um, are you working with galleries? Are you working strictly on a commission like basis with institutions and universities? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have generally represented myself. I do have a gallery that I've been working with for some time in Paris. But I do make smaller things. This is the thing is that this is why I say to people this is what I'm known for, because people can't fathom the other things. But I do make paintings and smaller sculptures. But um it's mostly the majority of the shows that I do, it is commission based work. Yeah, I don't. I can't say more than
My
that. And hmm
No, that's great. That's great. I mean, my other question has to do with some of the artists that have either inspired you. I use that rather than influence, but inspired you. I mean, your work is connected with this tradition of assemblage. There are people like Thornton Dial, Nora Purifoy. I mean, how do you locate yourself in relation to some of these other artists that may have inspired you over the years?
I think, I mean, I'm inspired by a lot of different artists, but yeah, definitely, I think I will say Noah Purifoy for sure. Keenholz actually initially was like a big influence. Um, Louise Nevelson, I will say Louise Bourgeois too, but Judy Pfaff actually, Betty Saar. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I think I think my thinking about it is starting to change a little bit, because I think I was thinking about it initially in a way in which like the ways in which like maybe like land artists were engaging with the environment in like the 60s and 70s, right, and making these monumental works that maybe you'd had to go on pilgrimages to see, potentially like the Michael Heisers, or like the spiral jetty, right, like these things that are maybe more mythological than they are factual, right, like that they're a larger conversation that has to do with something that is beyond your control, something that is like maybe inherent to the earth, right, or inherent to like human understanding, not maybe like a socio-political one. Something that is maybe like saying that it's taking a position outside of those things when it could never possibly, right, like it could in fact actually it's not possible. But like thinking about, okay, if the flip side of that is to then do the same thing but within like an urban kind of landscape, right, or like within a known kind of domestic parameter, right, like if the parameters are the home, or the homes that we've constructed for ourselves, like within our hearts or within the limitations of our imaginations, like sociologically, right, then what does that look like? What does that quote unquote land art look like, right? Like you have the Gordon Matta Clark like Bronx floor situation, or Richard Serra also like in the 70s made like some, went up to the South Bronx when it was the notorious fires
Yeah.
for right, like the burnt out street where he was also playing and making interventions into like a street that nobody would be bothered about, right? So thinking about how do you do that but inside the home, and then how do you
Mm,
do that and get to the heart of actually the things that we really believe about ourselves. I think that, we're all trapped in different kinds of thought ghettos that have been handed to us by society, or that we encase or enclose ourselves in without any help from anyone, right? It could be like, what Du Bois said about, right, like the double consciousness, right? Like, oh, it could be there's a hole in the veil and you're not doing a good job protecting the interiority life, right? And then so then you're now believing some of the things that are filtering through. And so maybe those are the things that are the bars that are being erected on the windows, are the ones that you have decided to believe yourself. But how do we smash all of that? And then how do we talk about everything all at once? So it's also like a gumbo. It's like, how do we talk about everything all at once and then address all of these spatial relationships and societal relationships?
Here's my final question. So I know you've taught, I believe, at Micah and Yale. Is that correct?
Hmm.
What can art school teach you, and what can it not teach you?
Well, art school really does a bad job of teaching you that this is actually a small business. Nobody wants to hear that. Okay, that's one. But I think what art school can teach you, nobody can take away from you if you can go in there with like an open heart and an open mind and you know who you are. So you're not going to get manipulated by strangers, right? But I think art school can really open the doors for you, right? Cuz then you're engaging in a history that you may not have, you that is larger than what your understanding currently is. And maybe people will suggest things to you, or you'll take a class, or you'll get access to a book or to a paper that you wouldn't have had outside of school, right? Like, yes, we're all life learners, right? But sometimes school really helps you along the way and gives you the big shove that you need. So I'm still a believer in art schools. And also the other thing that you can find it, but sometimes you have to move in order to do that, is community. You get like a beautiful enriching community. I have met some of the best friends of my life in grad school, and two of which I still talk to every single day. And I graduated 15 years ago. So you know what I mean? It's like I found lifelong, comrades and people in arms that understand who you are, understand where you're trying to go and what the work is, and believe in you. And there's actually nothing more important than that.
Well, I think that is a wonderful moment to end on. Abigail, I really want to thank you for being here today, and like you were wonderful. Your answers were great, and I'm so happy that we were able to get this coordinated. This is the first time we've had a chance to talk in this way, so
Yeah.
that is public is actually meaningful because it's on the record. It's recorded. I can listen to this later. Even though I hate listening to my own voice, I can still listen to this later. Well, I want to congratulate you on everything that has happened for you and everything that is yet to come. And just want to wish you a wonderful evening. If there's any final thing you'd like to say, feel free. But again, I want to thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. The one thing that I wanted to say earlier that I'm going to just say now is that I blame American cognitive dissonance on Thomas Jefferson. Mic drop. It's all his fault.
Okay. We can tie that to our follow-up conversation on reparations.
Yes, I'm
Well,
going to do
thank
it.
thank you so much, Abigail. I'm going to do my final words now and wish everyone a good evening. The Gantt Center's goal is always to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you allows the Gantt Center to expand its reach and further develop programs like Open Air. Lend your support to the Gantt Center by visiting ganttcenter.org/donate. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for future programs and other video content updates. We thank you all for joining us for another great conversation, and we look forward to next month's Open Air on July 14th with Samuel Levi Jones. Have a great evening, everyone. Good night.